All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversation today with Donald Thompson. We're going to let people start to drift in. People are coming in now. Hope everyone's doing well. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you, and why don't we just get started?
All right, we can do that. Hey, Rachel.
Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Rachel has decided to join us today.
Yeah.
She's our producer. And
And
there she
decided,
goes.
no, I don't really want to be in the webinar. Love you, Rachel. Thank you
Love
for
you,
all.
Rachel.
Well, anyway, yeah. So let's get things started. Welcome everybody to our webinar today, the next in our series on marketing in a downturn. Today we are really excited to have our friend, our clients. We're his client. We love this guy, Donald Thompson from the diversity movement, here to talk with us today about why DEI matters for EX and CX. So Donald, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this ever since we put it on the calendar. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And again, we also have my very able colleague and business partner, Brett Starr.
Hello. I want to hit my applause button. I just want to try it. There you go.
That didn't work.
Okay, sorry. I won't do that again.
Well, you know, one place we'd like to start every webinar we do, Donald's, with a moment of gratitude, where we talk about something that we are grateful for. And I'll kick it off before I flip it over to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So today, I'm grateful for our public libraries and all of our libraries. I have a partner who is a librarian, which, as you may or may not know, is not the easiest job in the world these days. And I got a lot out of growing up, out of going to the library. You know, I had parents who would take me to the library in the little town where we lived, you know, all the time. And books can change your life. They can expand your mind. And I'm grateful that we have people like our librarians who are willing to go the extra mile, put up with the BS because they know how important books are. So I'm grateful for them.
Well, no, I love that. I would say the first name that came to mind is Mary Crumity, my granny, who's since passed in Bogalusa, Louisiana. But she was one of the folks that early on in my life taught me, expected me to do anything I could dream, and was willing to put the work into. And that is something that I just think about really on a daily basis. And it helps form my steps, because we all have peaks and valleys in life, and we all need things that are nice little reminders of what our responsibilities are for our family and for our dreams and for our goals. And so thanks for giving that space. But that's one of the things that I'm super thankful for.
Thank you. Brett?
Today, I'm grateful for the town that I live in, Fort Worth, Texas. I moved here from Boston, Massachusetts in about 2005. And to be perfectly honest, I was on the fence for a few years about whether I'd made a really great or really terrible decision. But in the last 15 years or so, I've just built such a wonderful life here. Both my kids were born here. I've got tons of great friends inside, a great company. And I just really love it. I'm really grateful for it. And Fort Worth is evolving, becoming a great place every day. And oh yeah, we're in the college football playoffs.
There you go. TCU. Go get them more props.
And I'm drinking my Lucky Jack cold brew coffee today. Not a sponsor. Not a sponsor.
Today, Diet Coke for me. Sponsor. You have a beverage, or are you just just
a little water. Just a little water.
Natural hydration, nature soft drink, always good.
That's right.
Well, cool. Well, you know, I mean, I think a good place to start, you know, obviously, you know, we know you really well. You know, there are probably folks in our audience who don't know you, don't know the diversity movement. So why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about your story, you know, how you ended up being, you know, founder and CEO of your company, and how things are going for you right now.
Oh, thanks for the space. So the diversity movement, I'll start at the high level with the company, kind of who we are, what we do. We wanted to come at diversity, equity, inclusion slightly different. We wanted to have a very tight link to the business outcomes that leaders need to see in order for DEI to be sustainable. So for example, when we were working with folks in recruiting, we want to have very, very focused group on how do you create better job descriptions and postings? Let's get practical so that more people of different backgrounds will apply. If you're in sales, we want to work with sales professionals on how heterogeneous teams sell more software. So we wanted diversity, equity, inclusion to land and live where the business owner lands and lives. And so to do that, we created a technology-enabled consultancy to where we have a micro video library, we have an analytics engine, we have a digital learning library so that people can learn in the flow of how they work every day. How did I come to the diversity movement? I was running a marketing organization, have a background in technology sales, and I talked to a lot of clients when DEI was a topic, and they would say, sure, we want to have more better optics on our website. We would love to sell more products and service to people of color and different things. And I started to ask a very simple question. Would you like to transform your business from the inside out so your DEI programming from a brand standpoint are authentic? And to a person, to a leader, absolutely. But Don, here's the problem. Anytime we've engaged DEI practitioners, we get talked to about what we should do and what we should be, but it's not in the construct of how to build a better workplace. And ultimately, Don, that's how I get paid. Ultimately, that's how I drive the bottom line for my shareholders. And so that birthed a opportunity as an entrepreneur. I said, wait a minute, I can create those links. I'm a sales professional. I'm a marketer. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a Black professional. Let me see if I can figure something out. And so we embarked on seeing if we could create a space in the diversity, equity, inclusion arena, but really make it about personalizing the workplace experience to really drive productivity for everyone.
Well,
Wow.
selfishly, Don, I just love the overlap that you have with, where you are now and what you're doing from a DEI perspective, but also with marketing. And, we talk a lot about customer experience and how customer experience really covers brand and marketing. We think brand and marketing are kind of two different things, and sales and product and customer success. And there's really some interesting opportunities to think about DE&I in the perspective of how brand standards and marketing standards are typically run inside an organization where they become very centralized. And a lot of organizations tend to focus on script-driven sales processes or, presentations that are put together by, like the brand police or the message police. Yep. And what ends up in that scenario is, like a very homogenous voice coming from an organization that we perceive, we've come to perceive over time that can really be kind of limiting and letting people just be people and connect with each other and, filter things through their own perspective. I'm curious what your perspective is on, kind of the relationship between your initiatives and DEI and how you see that in kind of like the marketing context and the sales context we're talking about.
I really appreciate the question, and the reason that I'm getting actually a little animated. Over the last 2 months, we've had over 20 marketing organizations come to us to start working with their teams about integrating DEI into their brand strategy. Because what organizations know, and this is something you all live as the Starr conspiracy, something you help to teach us. If you have your brand and your positioning accurate, you have an authentic voice with your clients, you have the ability to win the trust battle. And if you're trusted, then your prices can stay right at a premium, right? And you build that loyalty, all the things that we believe in. You can't do that with a homogeneous audience voice. And so marketers are starting to understand, wait a minute, if my marketing team already looks one way, how do I achieve that authentic brand voice that we need to scale globally while we have a local footprint, right, for our sales professionals if we don't think about diversity, equity, inclusion? And so we're starting to have conversations about the language of inclusion. So instead of in the software speak, us saying man hours, we say person hours. Not unbelievably difficult, but very, very important to the way that you communicate authenticity. When you think about how do you do product innovation and companies that we work with, well, who's in the room when you're testing your packaging and your messaging? When you're building out your commercials and your video and your online presence, you can't create an authentic voice if you are not living what your customer is living. And you need a diversified team to do that. So Brett, the short answer is we're seeing an uptick, certainly in working with diversity, equity, inclusion professionals, talking about DEI in the enterprise. But one of the cheat codes I'll give to your audience and that we're seeing, and we're going to make a specific shift in 2023, is working with CMOs and how to attract that voice so that their conversion rates go up, so that the stickiness to their brand goes up. And we're seeing that in a pretty measurable way.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to say one more thing about it because I get really excited about this as well. People think in a B2B context, for instance, we work primarily in business to business, that people do not make emotional purchase decisions. And they actually, in my opinion, it's more likely that they're going to make an emotional purchase decision because their job's on the line, their career's on the line, their perception from their colleagues is on the line. And when people are making an emotional decision, they make a decision based on whether or not they connect with the people or the person that they're speaking with. And if everybody is just kind of trained to speak one way, then you're basically preventing that human connection that really makes the world go around in, brand marketing, sales, product, and customer success. And I think that, from our perspective, that takes a little bit of the loosening of this notion of a very rigid brand standard or message standard that has to be applied the same way every time to open up, the possibility of human connections that are already exist with the people that you have in your organization. Just don't constrain them, right?
I agree wholeheartedly. And I like to get practical. So if you think about when you have a web presence, right, and you are in B2B and you are looking at how to get better information that's sticky to your buyer, right, that is credible, trustworthy, that they share within their organization about you. Well, ADA compliance sounds legal, right? It's something someone's making me do. But if you think about ADA compliance in terms of a better user experience on my digital platforms, now all of a sudden you're creating a competitive advantage. And so a lot of times what we don't do correctly for DEI practitioners is we don't link the language of diversity to language that already exists in the business. Better conversion, right? Better stickiness on your website, right? Better attendance at your webinars that are going to drive targeted input into your sales funnel, right? Better gross margin because you've got a heterogeneous sales team, and now all of a sudden you are bringing together those in different corporations. We feel very strongly that most people are DEI practitioners. They're just calling it something different. And it's called winning in the marketplace. It's called the human-centered marketing. It's called all kinds of different things, but it's really how do you create a message where everyone can get involved with the brand voice, and that I want to be a part of your company, your mission, because I feel like your brand cares about me. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do in the marketing and the business context.
That brings up a really kind of interesting question. This is something that I think Brett and I have talked about a lot. I think it might even came up in our last webinar. It's just sort of like a lot of the things you're talking about, these are very much just straight ahead marketing and brand applications of, DEI, with a very clear connection to a business outcome. But I think that there's this conversation about, you have your employment brand, you have your consumer brand. And it's just like, we've been talking about, no, you really just have your brand, and it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about really kind of fits into that. It's just like, okay, you want to build a strong employment brand from a DEI perspective, you have to be building it from a consumer perspective.
One of the things I do and I enjoy is I love talking to people from different backgrounds, generational, different things. And so my kids are in Gen Z. And so I talk to a lot of their friends. I actually had a webinar with some of the friends of my kids, and they talk about the fact that they look to buy from companies that they feel like they can trust, right? They want to work for companies that they feel like they can trust. And they really are focused on the purpose of an organization before they spend. And so as we internalize these things, that organizational purpose that's on our website, we want to encourage corporations to put the foundation in so that you actually live it. It's actually not a new mantra that you have, right? It's really how do you link the mantras of things that you already believe and that they show up in practice so that they're not a new initiative. It's really something that becomes that behavioral outcome of what we've been preaching.
Well, and I guess sort of a related question is, what we're hearing kind of across work tech is just there's, this idea of like, there's definitely a feeling that there's some softness in the market. And one of the comments we've been getting back from some vendors is this distinction that buyers are drawing between a nice to have and a must have product. And it's just like, there's been a lot of, I think, momentum behind DEI in the work tech space. What would you say in terms of like in a difficult market, what makes DEI a must buy or a must have right now?
So a couple of things. I would do it from an employment standpoint, right? A lot of companies, unfortunately, are working through some layoff situations, right?
Yeah.
And they're working through some tough times and budgets are constrained.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep your best people motivated and focused and working with you? Your top tier talent will always have choices. And so what we focus our leaders on is how do you motivate and keep moving forward your top tier talent, number one. And then number two, how do you accelerate your sales cycle, right, in that down market? And so organizations are looking to be a part of organizations that are still pushing to the future. And so that means that brand that you're building, that inclusive brand, gives you more selling opportunities because you've widened the net. Mm-hmm. And you're going to need a wider net when it's harder to get every dollar. And right. So those are some of the things that we talk about in practice when we're dealing with some headwinds that are very real in terms of the economy that we're facing over the next 12 to 24 months.
But it sounds like y'all are doing pretty well from some of the comments that you made earlier. Just a couple of data points that I would throw out. I love Google Trends. I spend a lot of time on Google Trends, just looking at search relevance and everything. And we're in a moment right now where the search around the phrase layoff is trending to become as high as it was during 2009 and 2010 during the Great Financial Crisis. Yep. And it's already inching higher than it did during March and April of 2020. So there's tons of concerns about layoffs out there in the world. At the same time, I did a trend search on DEI and DE&I prior to this conversation, and it's at the highest relevance that it's ever been. And so if we're talking about like, nice to have versus need to have, and we're talking about how you're doing as an organization and, all these marketing groups that you just onboarded and the work that you're seeing, it seems like it's kind of squarely falling into the need to have category in a moment like this.
We're very fortunate in that we're getting it there, right? We're still in that time to close, right? Everybody's battling, right? Even if your pipeline is full and different things like that. But I will tell you the thing that's helping us with keeping it in that must have is that real ability to tie it to employee engagement, right? Because when you go through a layoff, when you go through tough times, or even when you're growing fast, you have to make sure that your team is focused on the main thing for your organization versus the shiny objects around the business or outside of the business. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, you have to have people managers that are really understanding this. And here's the trick. Here's the challenge and the trick. That balance between empathy and economics. Because there's a whole set of expectations now for leaders to be empathetic, to be more inclusive, to be more thoughtful. The way that I came up in business and feedback is, Thompson, you missed your number. If you do it again, you're going to get fired. X, Y, Z, and just direct. And you fixed it or you found another place to work. Whereas today it's, well, listen, we had a little gap in our financial performance, and is everything okay at home? And how are you doing? It's this whole different thought process for leaders. And so we've got to equip people leaders with the skill set to be able to manage and win and thrive in this new environment with this new expectation. Because even within times of turmoil, the talent you need to win can always find a job. And those are the folks that we want to, from an employee experience standpoint, really, really drill into. Doesn't mean everyone doesn't matter. It just means fiscally, there's a weighting. And you want your emerging talent, your growth talent, your business development folks, your marketing folks that are driving the bottom line to feel as little of that pressure impact as possible of what's going on around the business, so their performance stays really, really high.
Well, is that, a lot of people, I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, but I wanted to launch this poll because we talk to a lot of folks. This is a poll question that we ask every time we have a webinar. There's a wide range of responses to how people are performing right now in this moment. And so I just want to ask this question: how's the current downturn impacting your company? And we'll just let that run for a moment. And Steve, over to you.
Yeah, and you know, Donald, one of the things that, you know, we've had a lot of conversations over the past year or two, and one thing that I've always been impressed with, and you know, you certainly it's what you know you've really identified as being, you know, differentiated about your company is just like your focus on business outcomes. And when you do the storytelling about your very much A-list brand list of clients, it's just like you're obviously achieving, you know, business outcomes through your work for them in very impressive ways. What would you say to people who maybe have a belief that DEI doesn't or can't drive business outcomes?
So one of the things, and thank you so much for that question, because a lot of times people that may be uninitiated, uneducated, or have a negative point of view, they get put in a bucket that they're a negative individual, that they're a bad person, that they're a racist, they're XYZ. I try not to do that. I try to say, all right, tell me a little bit about why you feel that way. And then let's break it down into some practical points of view, right? And I usually talk about, hey, listen, do you think it's okay if we have ramps for folks in wheelchairs outside your office building? If we want to take the stairs, we can, but if somebody is working through a disability, they can take the ramp. The person's like, oh, yeah, of course, right? Do you think it makes sense that people that are doing the same job get the same pay? Oh, absolutely, of course. Do you think if you're trying to have the best sales force possible, that you should expand the number of schools that you recruit against, but not lower your standard for performance? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, then you're not negative about DEI. You're negative about the way it was portrayed to you. Mm-hmm. You're reacting to something that may have landed wrong with you as an individual, and that makes sense. You may have had a conversation about the LGBTQ plus community, and you're very religious, and you think someone's trying to change you versus expanding your point of view. And so when I talk to CEOs and leaders, I say very clearly, our goal is not to change people, but our goal is to expand your point of view so you can be a better leader for more different types of folks so you can win in the marketplace. And usually, Steve, when I have that conversation, I bring another 20, 30, 40, 50% of people over. And then the folks that are left, they don't care what I say. They're not for it. It's that woke stuff. It's I worked hard, you work hard too. Pull yourself up from the bootstraps. I don't care. And that's okay. But what I am looking for is not vilifying the people that just need to have things expressed in a way that they can understand. And one of the limitations, and it's helped that I'm a sales professional, that I'm a marketer, because I easily, without personalizing it, I alter my message slightly to the audience, because my goal is not to control my narrative, but to help someone else grow their business. So if I have to explain it a little bit differently, I'm happy to do it, right? And I try to bring as many people to the party as want to come to the party.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end this poll and show the results, because Steve, this is pretty interesting, because this has moved even since last week when we ran this poll. There's a lot more people in the kind of absolute nightmare, tightening our belts a bit, or playing it cool, no cuts, no increases bucket. Last week, when we ran the same poll, I think there was about 10 or 15%. We'd have to check the tape on that. There was about 10 or 15% who said, what downturn, we're kicking ass. And so, two, different samples, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to pretend that that's like scientific research. But does it feel like something has changed in the last, like 7 days?
Donald, what do you think?
Thanks for the space. I think it absolutely has. And I think that the closer that we get to the holidays, where people are taking some time off and have some time to think and process, sometimes you can be too busy as a business leader to think about the crisis, because you have so many things that are right in front of you. But as you're starting to look at predicting your future, planning for the next 12 to 18 months, as you actually look at your pipeline and sales cycle, in our case, our business is growing. But man, we're seeing a little downward pressure on our price points. Yeah, our business is growing. We're really pleased with what we're doing. man, we're seeing people taking a little bit slower to say yes and complete the paperwork versus yes and complete the paperwork, right? Yes and complete the paperwork versus yes and complete the paperwork, right? And so those drags on the business are starting to surface themselves. And I think that I have seen, and I'm very fortunate in that I talk to hundreds of companies across all different industries. And we're seeing folks that even are doing well are starting to tighten their belts as a precautionary thing of things that they're uncertain about. And so we're about to hit some real headwinds, but I'm hopeful, right, that it's a 6 to 12 month thing, not a longer in duration thing, right? That it's a real thing, but it's a real thing that has a couple phases that don't last too long.
Well, something you said, I just really want to double click on. This is a time of year where we're kind of processing, our emotions from everything that happened over, the last year. It reminds me a lot of the transition from 2009 into 2010. There was also that moment of reflection at the end of the year in 2009. And moving into 2010, organizations right now are kind of thinking about how they're going to approach the year. And, I can say with great confidence and great evidence at, multiple points in history like this, the organizations who saw the opportunity in, what's coming in 2023 and saw their opportunity to take control of the narrative, to increase their share of voice as, kind of larger, more established brands kind of pulled back on everything from marketing spend to sales staff and, tighten their belts. Et cetera, et cetera. It's moments like these, it creates a real crucible where new leaders are formed, and that leadership can, manifest over the next 2 or 3 years. But so many great companies were built because of their decisions during the great financial crisis, because of their decisions in March and April of 2020. And the same thing is going to happen, going into 2023. And so it's a real gut check moment. And I would just personally encourage people to, a lot of times people think about issues. They think about everything from like an issues perspective, like what's the problem we need to work on? And from our perspective, when all you're ever doing is looking at fixing problems, you end up, constantly in a negative state of thinking you have so many problems. And if rather you said, what do we have to build on? What opportunities do we have to pursue? And you pursue those opportunities, a lot of times the things that you thought were issues go away because the opportunities that you pursue end up taking you in a better direction where the problems just become, the friction just goes away. And so I think we're, headed for a moment right now that's really going to create opportunities for leadership turnover in the market for individuals, based on how they approach 2023. And, I hate to say it out loud, but I can't help but feel a little bit excited about, watching how 2023 unfolds.
No, I love it.
Well, I guess, kind of along those lines, and really thinking about things in terms of opportunities rather than issues or problems is a very, key kind of mindset around the Starr conspiracy. Something Brett brought in is really, it's not only changed the way that we look at things, it's just like for me personally changed the way things look at everything. What I'm kind of curious, when you look at the year ahead, Donald, you think about the opportunities that are ahead for your company. Where are you seeing opportunity in 2023?
So one of the things, and thanks for that space, this is really where our decision a year or two ago to invest in building out technology is going to pay dividends. Because we can sell our micro video platform into an organization at $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to give 50,000 employees access to DEI content that is expertly curated, right? We can drop our digital learning modules into the LMS at Lenovo, for example, and their worldwide team can access our content. So we're very optimistic at some decisions we made 2 years ago that the technology tools and resources that we have, and you all know this, once you pay for the technology, you can be flexible on price point. So I have some sunk costs that I've already eaten, right? So now I can be sensitive, right, to where my clients are living, and I can focus now on share of voice, on client acquisition, and then play the long game because I have enough technology tools that are already baked in and ready to go. Steve, when you and I met, right, 2.5, 3 years ago, right, I was selling PowerPoints, right? You know what I mean? Like I had a bunch of PowerPoint software, that I thought was amazing. You were like, okay, right? But now 2.5 years fast forward, we have some real tools in the market, and that's going to give us the ability to be thoughtful with the real price pressure that's in the market and play for the long term.
Well, just two things that I've got a double click on there. The first is, you've said this twice now, and I think it's worth, kind of focusing on. Sometimes you have to play a little bit of a different sales game when the economy changes.
Yes.
And the trick is, how do you change your sales game without changing your customer experience? Right. And so a lot of times people will, be really recalcitrant to, if they feel like they have a premium position, they'll feel a lot of, aversion to like lowering price points as deals start to slow down, et cetera, because they think that that's inherently eroding their customer experience, when in fact, it may be just how you do it. So that's the first point, is like, you mentioned just this notion of, you got to change your sales game a little bit. And then, oh gosh, what was the second point? I do this all the time. Okay, well, let's talk about the first point.
Jump in on that as you go, and changing your sales game and eroding your brand dominance and all these different things. Well, if you got to lay off people, what's your brand dominance? If you're losing market share, then what's your brand dominance? Like, what's your responsibility as a leader, right? You have to protect your team, right? As much as protect the brand and all of these different things. And you have to look out for your client. And if you think about those things, looking out for your employees, looking out for your client and the long term of the business, now you're not talking about price concessions. You're talking about listening to the market. And if you tell an executive that they're listening to the market, all of a sudden they're, oh, I can do that. Different than lowering prices, right? So it's all about how we think about the decisions that we have to make.
Yeah, and I finally remember that second point. When you're affecting a digital transformation from a primarily services-driven organization, and you're augmenting your revenue streams with software revenue streams, that also increases the valuation of your business, right? And so, all of us who have been in professional services organizations know how that works, and the margins are just not, the same as they are in software, because of, some of the components that you just mentioned. And it also makes you more resilient in times like these. And so just having those options, again, does that, what impact does that have on the customer experience? A lot of people, as they're making that transformation from a services-based business to kind of a combination of services and software, feel like they're inherently, kind of changing the customer experience. And in my opinion, the reality is, well, do you know what kind of customer experience you're trying to create? So let's start there, because most folks don't, really connect brand and marketing and sales and product or service or customer success all into a single function that's driven by a customer experience vision. And if you have a customer experience vision that unites the kind of experience that you want to create for people, then you can start to make decisions about diversifying your portfolio of products and services, changing your sales approach based on the economy. So I'm going to throw it over to Steve. I'm going to launch our second poll question, which is, how integrated is your brand, marketing, sales, product, and customer success strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. Well, there's just a bunch of questions that I'd love to dive into. The one of the things, when you're talking about your product and the videos that you have are so well done. The content is great. But one of the things that I really have been impressed in kind of going through your product is in kind of the AI chatbot, where you can where a user can ask questions, and as someone who, in our organization, we're working through an engagement with you. Your team is fantastic, but one of the things as a leader in an organization that I'm really grateful to your team for is it's difficult and uncomfortable to go through this as a leadership team. And your team was very, very quick to say, look, this is a very natural thing to come up with. And so we also know that it can be difficult and uncomfortable for a lot of people. And part of what, the chat bot, I think, is great, is that there's a lot of questions that people wouldn't feel comfortable asking another human, but they're more than willing to ask the AI. Tell us a little bit kind of about, that part of the product and kind of that bit of the experience.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because the technology is the outcome of our care for our client. We want the quiet things to be said out loud, but they don't have to be said out loud in public.
Right.
And so they can be said out loud, typing into that digital FAQ and getting that information, getting that micro video that you can look at, getting a learning path for you as an executive, because people are curious, people want to learn, but people don't want to look uneducated in public.
Right.
People don't want to say the wrong thing that may offend someone in a team setting. And we're all very fearful of that as leaders, right? Because we have been indoctrinated as leaders, right? That we're supposed to have the right answer, right? And we're not used to being vulnerable. And this is one of those topics, right, that really tests that. What we decided is we're not going to try to sell against human nature. So we wanted to have tools that take psychological safety into the mind and say, listen, let's get it out. We want people to have the information. What is a microaggression, right? What do all these acronyms mean? Think if you're in a public setting, right? It's LGBTQIA+, right? Who knows what all that means? Like, unless you're in a DEI practitioner, right? I asked someone that is a part of the LGBT community, what does queer mean? They were like, well, it means different things to different people. I'm like, oh, right? It's like, what are you talking about, right? Or if you don't understand pronouns. And so we created technology solutions to deal with the real world challenges of learning something new and emotive in a business context. And so thanks for bringing that up, but we did that so that people could have that private space. And what we're finding is that people are starting to trust us to where now with our micro videos, we have 600 micro videos, 2 to 3 minute snippets, but leaders are saying, tell us the ones we should focus on. Which ones should be there for our people managers? And so what they really want, and this is about product development and listening to the voice of your clients, is they want tightly curated playlists of micro content. Now, I wouldn't have known that 2.5 years ago. I'm like, we can get some videos or get some digital tools or get some AI. But what people really want is micro content in playlists based on their role, their personality. So a CFO doesn't want the same thing as your creative or your people manager. And so we're now getting very, very tight with the customer intimacy so that we can create the playlist that creates the digital DEI journey that meets with your appetite, your perspective, your experience, and your role within the business. And when we can do that with a 5 to 7, 10 question survey, and then link that to 10 to 12 videos you need, now all of a sudden, right, you're going to see the diversity movement hit its next level. But thank you so much for the question, and hush me anytime, because I just get excited about like talking about this stuff.
You're the star. You're the star. So I'm going to share the results from the poll. How integrated is your brand, marketing, sales, product, and customer success strategy? Most people are in the could be better, but I'm not complaining. Then there's no integration, but works for us. Have some folks saying totally integrated, 5 fingers, 1 hand. And then no one said every group thinks all the other groups suck. And what's interesting about that is almost every organization that I've ever worked with thinks that every other group sucks. So I don't know, I don't know. But Con, I'm curious, what do you see, if any, is the relationship between where we are with companies' focus on DE&I today and the pandemic? Do you see any relationship there? Was there any, kind of driver that occurred because of our shared experience during the pandemic?
I would say absolutely yes. And it's going to be a little bit different answer than maybe the audience would anticipate. For us, diversity, equity, inclusion is not just race, gender, or sexual orientation. It's generational. It is folks that are dealing with, that have kids with disabilities. It is folks that are in single parent homes. And so when you think about the pandemic and what it did to our school systems and learning and hybrid work, right? And it created an environment where a lot of the things that are challenging us had been exposed, right? So if you think about digital learning, if you're in a social economic situation where each one of your kids, if you have multiple kids, can have a computer, then online learning is easier. If you have one computer in the home, now all of a sudden you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, right? From a socioeconomic standpoint. If you live in a rural town and your internet is not as strong as if you're living in the city, then your learning capabilities are different, right? And so I think the pandemic started to have us to really think about things like mental health. It really had to think about things like access to basic things, like food inequities, right? And so absolutely, when I think about the pandemic, it really started to expose, right, this broader construct of gaps in our economy, of the haves and the have-nots, and what do we as a society really want to do about it? And that became really, really important. So the short answer is yes. The flip side that I would say on a positive is we really changed the paradigm of what work looks like pretty quickly, right? Like, I mean, a lot of us were able to pivot to remote work pretty quickly to keep our businesses going and keeping, the fight together and during a tough economy. And I'm really proud and excited of how we were able to do that. I mean, because it could have been a different kind of disaster. I'm no fan, right, of the Trump administration, not to get political, like I was just no fan, but they did a good job with the PPP loan structure, with how to get that, the vaccines done and different things. There were some things that were done as a society together that we gloss over because people are mad at each other all the time, right? But there's some things that we did as a society, right, to keep the trains moving together. And I think that should be applauded a little bit more than it is. But I do think that the pandemic has exposed some DEI things more on the social construct than ever before.
Well, I think we achieved a lot more together than people actually give us all credit for.
Okay.
It's like we achieved a lot of things together while still not liking each other in some instances,
Right.
A lot of really great things happen. And, I just, people are tired of hearing me talk about organizing principles, but we are in a moment where we are at the onset of a new organizing principle. And, organizing principle is real easy to understand. There's a big event that changes the world. There's a response to that event, and then that reorders the field. And whether you're talking about a business field or social field, it's just like simple social theory, field dynamic theory, right? And so, we all remember the invention of we don't all remember the invention of the World Wide Web, but some of us do. That was a big event, right? Then the industry response, was software as a service, cloud, right? There was an organizing principle that divided people in half. All of the leaders in the business field had a stake in keeping everyone on premise. So they said, don't go to the cloud, don't go to the cloud. It's scary. They're going to steal your data. It doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of the innovators were saying, no, the cloud is awesome. You need to go to the cloud, go to the cloud, go to the cloud. And then you sprinkle on that, a little internet bubble action, some economic headwinds, and suddenly the whole market turns over. On-premise companies that were huge blinked out of existence. Companies that didn't even exist, like Salesforce.com, now have the tallest skyscraper in San Francisco, and they're the largest employer, and it happened just like that, right? That's what's happening right now. And so this organizing principle was created around the pandemic, obviously different than the invention of World Wide Web, but it was a major event that impacted every, aspect of life. There are people on one side of the fault line who say everything's going to go back to normal. We're all going back to the office. Work's going to be the same, et cetera, et cetera. And guess who those people are? They're like the CEO of WeWork. It's like,
right. Yeah.
Who says, how to tell when an employee is disengaged when they don't come back into the office. It's like, gee, I wonder why you have that opinion, right? And so you've got folks who are trying to hold on to the way things were. And then you've got folks on the other side saying, as you just said, the world of work has changed permanently. And we need new solutions for that. And now you sprinkle a little recession on top of that. You've got some belt tightening from the leaders. You've got some innovators out there who want to control the narrative and jump out into the market. And we are at the moment where new leaders are going to be created. There's going to be new skyscrapers in San Francisco and New York and Raleigh-Durham. And they're going to have different logos on them about 10 years from now, and mark the tape. It's going to happen. That's all I have to say about that.
No, I love the way you framed it. And the only thing I would add as an extension is, how do we want to behave in those moments, right? That's the question. Like, what do we want to be as leaders, right? I was thinking, and I was jotting notes as you were talking, how do I want to behave in this new paradigm, right? So that I can be part of that new leader emergence, right? And that's super cool.
Well, hey, Donald, since we're getting close to time, I want to make sure that I give you a chance to talk about your book, since you are an author and just had this come out. Tell us a little bit about how the book came about. I assume that it's something that's been years in the making, and now, an overnight success, no doubt.
Yeah, right. So underestimated the journey of a CEO. One of the things that is real, right? I went through 15 years in high-end technology sales and never sold a big deal to someone that looked like me. And so I remember that day when I sat across the table to someone that looked like me, and it was amazing, but it was startling, right? And so I talk about the things that I've worked on and worked through, who's helped me. And the goal of the book, quite frankly, is that whatever our limitations, right, I wanted to create a point of inspiration for things that people can become. That's number one. The second thing is, I wanted to say thank you for a lot of the folks that helped me along the way. And the book does that. And then the third thing is, and you all know this from a brand standpoint, right? I wanted to create an environment to where people thought of me as a thought leader, and having a book helps do that. And so it was a three-legged stool in terms of those things. And I'm really excited that it's completed. But I will say this as I talk about the book. The book is completed. My story is ever changing. Yeah. Right. And that's one of the things. But thanks for a space. And you can get it in Amazon, anywhere you buy books, you can get access to the book. But I appreciate space to talk about it.
Well, and another question I had to kind of follow on what you're saying is, Brett and I, we've been around this space. I think we crawled out of the primordial soup. So we've seen a lot about technology and founders. We had, I started our office in San Francisco years ago. So we've been kind of around. And when you talk about homogeneity, when you think about like tech founders, there's a lot of sameness there.
Sure.
What's something that, that we don't know that we should know about being a Black man who is a founder of a tech company?
When you encounter folks that have a different background pedigree than you, just realize they're a little more nervous, a little more uncomfortable, a little more unsure. And just give a little, not a space for the quality of their business or quality of their product. Keep that high, right? Invest where you want to invest, where you think it makes sense, right? Chase the clients you want to chase. But realize that that person is coming from a different space of comfort level, and how they're communicating to you their value, how they're communicating to you what they're doing. And then the second thing that's really, really important is, the faster that we find commonalities, the faster we can move past it. And if you see that face that looks a little different than you, and then instead of getting right to the business, you find those commonalities, which they are there. But when you find them, now all of a sudden everyone resets in that dialogue, and now you can have a great business dialogue. And so that would be the thing that I would share with the two of you and your positions of leadership and influence as you move out through the world.
Well, what's something that you wish you had known before you came into this role? If you could go back, time machine, tell yourself something, what would that be?
Oh man, this is a good one. I will tell you this. 20 years ago, I had some PR folks come into my office when I was running a tech company, and they were talking to me about being a thought leader, and I should blog and I should write more. And I threw them out of my office. I literally was like, you need to get the hell out of my office. What I need are more leads and more dials and more sales appointments. I don't know what this thought leader shit is, right? And literally I reacted poorly, right? It was a bad decision. if I would have really understood the value of how you build credibility by doing podcasts, by writing blogs, by being in industry briefings, I would have really doubled down on that 2 decades ago in my career, even if I had to start small with why I'm successful in sales, right? If that's what I was good at the time, I would have started developing my expert narrative wherever I could, as soon as I could, because ultimately you do business with people you trust. You do business with experts, you do business with that you like. And that's one of the big mistakes that I would say.
That's great advice for individuals as well, though, right? As the world becomes like more decentralized, you can be a salesperson who's blogging, and it doesn't have to be under the company's banner. And there's so many different ways to connect and network and build your credibility that weren't available. I was making fun of somebody who happens to live in my house the other day because, my name on Venmo, and I'm not saying this so that people send me money, but my name on Venmo is Brett-Starr. And when my wife tried to get a Venmo account, it was like the only thing that was available was like Jennifer-Starr 757685543, and like that. Well, that's what you get when you're an early adopter. Now, but the other side of that, is if you go all the way back to like LinkedIn, when LinkedIn started, and I was an early adopter back then, I had also adopted like 15 other platforms that don't exist anymore that I invested so much time in. And so, it's a great opportunity for individuals. It's a great opportunity for business leaders, but thought leadership doesn't have to be a company brand thing. It doesn't have to be, it can be something that you take, responsibility for and see the opportunity in for yourself. Because we're all entrepreneurs, right? Even if we're not, running a business or, we're all out there making money for ourselves and investing in ourselves.
Exactly right. No, I don't have anything to add to that, my friend. That's exactly right. I love that.
Well, what a great conversation, and what an honor and a privilege to speak with you today. And I know that everybody out there are getting lots of great feedback. I know that everyone out there really enjoyed the conversation. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Steve, I'll leave it up to you for the close because you're much more eloquent than I.
Well, then I think you're in trouble, my friend. Yeah, I think that, this has been a great conversation. I mean, Donald, time spent talking to you is always time well spent. I always learn something. I guess, where I'd like to leave it is really with one last question for you. What are you excited about when you look to 2023?
The simple answer is, what can I do to be a better leader to accelerate the growth of my firm? I've really found over the years that when I change, the team members that I've brought forth, they hop to it. And so a lot of times when I'm frustrated within or without someone else, it's really some things that I'm doing or communicating. So 2023 is about, how do I continue to become a better leader right in the moment that we're in? And that's what I'm working at.
Very well said. And I know that feeling. So very, very well said. Brett, Donald, thank you so much for a great conversation.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Steve. Talk to you next time. Everyone out there in TV land, have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.